what's up, and welcome back to Interpreting the Stars, where today we're talking about Will Smith's latest film, Bad Boys 3, Bad Boys for Life. Now, normally I go through a preparation marathon on my channel for sequel films just to get myself pumped up for the latest film. But I decided against that for Bad Boys 3 because I already went through a Will Smith rewatch marathon going through his entire filmography about a year ago or so I didn't want to see the previous Bad Boys films again so soon. So sue me, it's been 17 years since we saw Will Smith and Martin Lawrence play these roles though. Can they still do it? Or is this more of a quixotic attempt to pull in money from an already established fan base? I don't know, so let's get cracking. This review is brought to you by the word of the day, quixotic. Foolishly impractical, like trying to open a can of pickles with a wet sock. Bad Boys for Life brings Mike Lowry and Marcus Burnett back into the line of duty when a vengeful and mysterious villain begins to execute people like lawyers, judges, and confidential informants. How does it all connect though? And why does the villain have a massive vendetta against Mike Lowry? He must get to them before they get to him first. So first things first, it has been 17 years, so if you're a fan of this franchise, it's undoubtedly nice to see things settle back into that world and to see these two characters that have always had great chemistry work alongside each other once more. That, in and of itself, is worth it to watch this movie, and that's coming from me, who's never really been a massive fan of the series. Also, it should at least be noted that for the first time, Michael Bay was not returning to direct this film, but it still had a bit of his essence in there. So it felt different, but it also felt similar at the same time, which for me is the best way to make a sequel. Change things up a bit, but still have the same soul. That way you can still believe that you're in the same world as before, and you can believe that again here. But back to it being 17 years. I mean, you had 17 years to come up with a solid story, and all you really came up with was a bad guy escaping from jail and killing the people that put him away one by one. Really? I mean, that's like an episode of Law & Order. I mean, sure, there's a little bit more to it than that, but truthfully, not by much. I mean, look, every one of these films, unfortunately, has the classification of being basically just a standard buddy cop action film. It's cool to see Will Smith and Martin Lawrence in these roles because they work really, really well together. But when you look at them as individual characters, they're not much of anything on their own. So the films have often relied more heavily on the story themselves, which have never really been anything super special. But something about the other films, the stories in those last two films worked a lot better for me. Something about them stood out as bad boys stories, while this one just felt like a run-of-the-mill revenge plot against cops, lawyers, judges, and the like that put these bad guys away. That's something we've seen way too many times to count, so it almost feels like that 17 years was wasted. Let's talk about the characters for a second though, because one of the main things that happens in the film is for a short amount of time, Will Smith and Martin Lawrence are split up. And like I said, on their own, they're not much of anything, and you can really see that when you watch this movie. Thankfully, they do have a few newer characters that they introduce that kind of fill that void in the meantime. They aren't anything legendary or incredible or memorable, but they are diverse, and they do hold importance into what's going on in the film overall. As far as the humor is concerned, it still works out pretty well. There's a good balance in this film, as usual, as to what's humorous, what's serious, and what's thought-provoking. In fact, Joe Pantoliano, can't remember how you say his name, he's an actor I haven't seen in a few years. It's really nice to see him again as Captain Howard, and he does great in that role. I'd actually go as far to say this was Captain Howard's best film out of the bunch, as far as his performance and dialogue goes. Some really good stuff in there. Anyways, I wouldn't say that there's a lot in this film that I would consider extraordinary or game-changing, but I did have a good time with it, and truthfully, I often had trouble really getting into the first two films in the series. I found them to be a victim of their time. So certain things were cheesy and over the top, but this film fits more with the times now, and its messages about analog versus technology is also pretty fun in this film as well. Let's look at that final score. From an unbiased vantage point, I think there's a lot of impressive things going on in this movie, and that unbiased score is 84%. And even though I enjoyed this movie, I'm still not the biggest fan of the franchise as a whole, so my bias score is 78%, averaging everything out to a final score of 81%. 81 out of 100 possible stars, landing this with a letter grade of B-. Now, technically, I have this scored higher than the other films. That could be due to mitigating circumstances, or it could just be the fact that in general I enjoyed this more. Who knows? I'd have to revisit the first two to know for sure. I'd like to hear your thoughts on Bad Boys for Life in the comments down below. Did you enjoy seeing Will Smith revisit his glory days as Mike Lowry, or was this just something that they should have just avoided altogether? Let me know. As for YouTube, you know what to do. Hit the subscribe button if you like this review, as there's more like it coming out. Hit the thumbs up button, because that always helps on my channel. And don't forget about the little bell icon, because that'll help notify you when I come up with my next review. And until next time, peace out!